Where Jesus is the center of attraction. We come before God's presence today into his house of worship to glorify and worship and lift up the name of Jesus. Hallelujah. King of kings, Lord of lords. Hallelujah. All week God has been telling me, it's too big for you. You can't fight this. It's too big for you. You can't fix this. It's too big for you. Turn it over. Turn it over. So God is telling his people today, whatever the issue is, no matter how small, no matter how great, no matter how long you have been trying to handle the situation yourself, turn it over. Turn it over to God and trust him in each and every day, every time it comes across your mind. Thank God for the outcome in advance. Praise him in advance. Hallelujah. 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 The scripture this morning, we're going to be reading Psalms 33, starting at verse 1 down to verse 5. It says, "Rejoice in the Lord, O ye righteous, for praise is comely for the upright. Praise the Lord with harp. Sing unto him with the psaltery and an instrument of 10 strings. Sing unto him a new song. Play skillfully with loud noise. For the word of the Lord is right, and all his works are done in truth." Hallelujah. So whatever that issue is, God's word is true. He said all things are possible to him who believes. All things. It doesn't matter how small, doesn't matter how big, doesn't matter how insignificant you may think it is, how overwhelming, overbearing. It is impossible, hallelujah, to conquer the word of God. Hallelujah. Amen. Father, we thank you, my Lord, that you are all powerful, you are all knowing, that you are truth, my God, you are light, my Lord. In the name of Jesus, we give you praise today, my God. We thank you, my Lord, hallelujah, that every need, every situation is covered under the blood, and you have already worked it out. In Christ Jesus' name, we stand on that truth, my God, and on that promise. We give you all praise, thanks, and the glory. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We are going to do our mission and our vision. So will you please stand and participate with us and believe God's word, his rhema word, his truth. Our vision is to be the best training and evangelistic ministry in the world. Our mission, center of attraction, exists for the purpose of glorifying the name of Jesus through worship, Christian discipline, and the proclaiming of the gospel. Hallelujah. What kind of place is this? A progressive and prosperous place. A place of worship to our God, an apostolic and prophetic place. A place of community and international outreach. A place exploding in growth. And what did Jesus say in John 12:32? And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. So what will this household do today? We are going to lift him up, lift him up, lift Jesus up. Hallelujah! Father, we give you praise today. We lift up the mighty name of Jesus. We thank you, my Lord, that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. We give you all praise, all thanks, all glory, my God. We thank you that our footsteps are ordered by you. In Christ Jesus' name, we give you all the praise, all the thanks, all the glory. Hallelujah! 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 Father, we thank you. Hallelujah! We thank you, my God, for this place. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Ooh, glory! Hallelujah! Ooh. Psalms 30 says, verse 1, I will extol thee, O Lord, for thou hast lifted me up and hast not made my foes to rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried unto thee, and thou healest me. O Lord, thou hast brought me. O Lord, thou hast brought my soul from the grave. Thou hast kept me alive, that I should not go down to the pit. Father, we give you praise today. We thank you, Lord, that you are our keeper. Hallelujah. You are our sustainer, my God, our restorer. Hallelujah. We give you praise today, my Lord. Hallelujah. It's time for praise and worship. Hallelujah. 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 Let's get outside of ourselves and concentrate on God. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. God is good. I have enlisted the services of two relatives of mine to worship the Lord with us today. Grace. Y'all know Grace? This is huge. This is huge. Not very few enough. God is so good. This is things that we're supposed to be doing. Our little ones are supposed to be singing, and this is how they learn. They're supposed to be doing the flags, because those are the things that are going to move them forward when they're at school alone without their parents, and they're going to have to stand up for the name of Jesus Christ, and they're going to have that already built up inside of them. And so we just take that. When I was in, in 6th grade, my mom said, you're going to get up, you're going to be on the worship team. And I was like, what?
That was 4th grade.
We were just learning our instruments. 4th grade. Now, I didn't know how to play. I didn't know how to play like that. But I knew a few notes and got to those few notes, and he expanded them to other instruments. And so God is so good. He will take what you do. If you push your kids, even if they don't want to do it, I'm just sorry, they don't know what they want to do. You push them into what you think they should be doing by the Spirit. And then you go, you do that, and you move that way, God will work out the rest of the steps. You know, she's a little bit nervous singing up here. It's okay. I don't even care if she's in the mic. She's just moving in the steps of where God wants her to be. He'll do the rest of the steps. You just keep following. And you keep following. All right? Here we go. Fear not. Thank you, Lord. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you, said the Lord. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you, said the Lord. Fear not, fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you.
I heard a bam! 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 Y'all kick that joke where you were hitting it. Bam! Bam! Yeah! Well, I fight my bam. Yeah, come on. Knock it out the park. Yeah, yeah, Lord. Yeah, yeah, come on, God. You got it, God. Damn it, God. Yeah, God. Standing for the Lord this morning. Know that God Victory belongs to Jesus. Victory belongs to Him.
Everybody say, I got the victory. Say, I got the victory. Right now, I claim the victory. It belongs to me right now. Victory belongs to me. Now praise the Lord for it today. Hallelujah! I got it. I got it. Thank you, praise God. I got the victory. I got the victory. Somebody say, I got the victory. Amen. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Let's begin to
wait till the battle is over to shout now. Y'all wait till the battle is over to shout now. Don't wait till the battle is over to shout now. Hallelujah. Don't wait till the battle is over to shout now. Somebody say, I'm a winner. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. I can't lose. I can't lose. I can't lose. Can't lose. Can't lose. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. Say, I can't lose. I can't lose. I can't lose. I can't lose. Jesus on my side. Jesus on my side. I can't lose. Well, she said, can't wait till the battle is over. Come on, give the Lord a shout. Hallelujah. If you got the victory, come on. Hallelujah. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. Thank you, Flavius. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, saints. Hallelujah. We're not going to look around. We're not looking down. We're not looking back. We're looking up. I said we're looking up today. Hallelujah. Go ahead, Mike, with your scripture.
Scripture I heard plain as day is Psalm 37:9, and it reads, "For the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust the Lord will possess the land."
Hallelujah. Scripture concerning the Psalms. You got to sing songs that's word sound. Word sound. So this is why sometimes you see prophets not getting up with scripture and words and such, because we want you to know that we're singing the word. And we're confirming the word. Hallelujah. Did anyone else have something to say real quick? Just come to the mic quickly. Let's do that. Amen. Just come to the mic. Come to the mic. Amen. We rebuke every clay feet. Every clay feet that's been slowing you down. Somebody today you feel like you're stuck. You feel like you got clay feet. You're just moving slower than time. Slower than God's time. That's who you stand right now. We're going to rebuke that off of you today in Jesus' name. Hallelujah. 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 Amen. You, even in your standing, you're getting the victory right now. Even as you stand. Even as you stand. Even as you stand. I'm declaring to you, you're getting the victory right now. Hallelujah. God is breaking some things right now. God is destroying some things right now. He's sending ambushments against your enemies right now. He's saying yes to your no. Yes to every no situation right now. In Jesus' name, say right now. It is so for me. I have the victory. I am a winner. I am in God's perfect timing. Right now. In Jesus' name. I rebuke procrastination and cast it from me. Lethargy must go. In Jesus' name. I am in God's perfect plan. Perfect will. In His purpose for me. It begins today. Slothfulness is not my character. I am an on-time Christian. Serving an on-time God. I give God some praise for that today. See yourself walking in the victory. See yourself determined. See yourself determined. Hallelujah. The line goes like this. You can't keep a good man down. Can't keep a good woman down. Can't keep it down. Scripture says you knock that man that's righteous down 7 times, he gets back up. 7 is the number of what? Completion. The
say, let me blow your mind. The victory belongs to Jesus. He was the spotless lamb. He's the only one worthy. He says, come to me, continue to come to me in unity. The inheritance belongs to you. There's a power inside of Christ to receive. We need to receive that power right now. A power worthy of blowing our minds. Receive it.
Receive it.
Before Apostle got up and said get the flags, I saw the flag going forth, breakthrough. And I heard him say, I'm breaking through the breakthrough. Stop looking at the situation through your eyes and see it through his eyes.
Hey, if God is for us, who can be against us? When Brother Mike was talking about possessing the land, I've been reading about how the spies were sent to spy out the land of Canaan, the land of promise, the land flowing with milk and honey. And so I've been getting to ask God, I think, God, all these things that come against me that is hindering me from possessing what you have promised me. God, show me what it is that I need to do. And so he was showing me some things. And so when I was reading in Numbers 13, how the spies were sent out to spy the land, and they came back with with all kind of negative reports. And so in Numbers 13 and 30, and Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once, possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. And so they still came back with the reports that, these people, they have giants in the land, and we look like grasshoppers to them. And so when you're going through life and you don't feel like that the promises are coming to you, and they sometimes they do look like giants, but our God is bigger. So if God is for us, who can be against us?
I got two things. Good morning. I just want to say, I think last week when we were in praise and worship, and I think Apostle had everyone that was going through some things. I don't know, I want to say last week, but I'm not sure right now. And they were going through something in their life. He had people to stand. And Jock stood. And he gave his testimony. He said, I thank God that he covered my name. And so when I heard the songs this morning, I heard, now God been dealing with me about being covered. He's covering us. And every song that they have sung today was talking about being covered in Jesus. Everything is about being covered through him, because he covers your name. He covers your family name. He goes back in generations, because you praying for those that you know that have been through some things in your family. And he said, I cover your name. Now think about your name. What is worth to Jesus? What is worth to God? He covers you every day through the blood of Jesus. And the other thing that came to me, I was standing, rather, and God showed me a hammer breaking up the ground. Yeah. And so I had my husband, because I don't have my phone, I had my husband to look up the hammer breaking. And in Jeremiah 23 and 29, the word says, is not my word like fire, declares the Lord, and like the hammer that breaks the rock in pieces. Begin to believe that God is breaking the ground wherever you are in pieces. Amen.
Get the red flag. We want to do a prophetic act here about the covering. Red flag, red flag. Amen. Hallelujah. We have quick people here in the church. They move quickly. They move very quickly. All right. This is why I believe if you got the word, then you need to demonstrate the word. And so, hallelujah. I want you to come and cover us. This word, the word works.
Yes, at the beginning when I was talking, I didn't share what I was talking about. Jael in the Old Testament, in the book of Judges, Deborah had told Barak to go out and fight a battle. Barak said, I'm not going to go without you. She said, well, the glory's going to be given to a woman. And this I think his name was Sisera or something like that, was running in the battle from God's people and went to this tent where this woman Jael was, and he said, give me a glass, and she gave a glass of milk, and he laid down, went to sleep. And she went and got a hammer and a peg. It was hammer time. She nailed him to the ground. And God said it's hammer time right now. He nailed his stuff to the ground. And the cross is at the cross where I first saw the light. And the burning my heart rolled away. It was the blood. Somebody outside now. The blood is against you. The blood is against you. Jesus already took the nail print. He already took the nail print. And we are redeemed. Somebody say, I am redeemed from the curse of the law. I am redeemed. Hallelujah. Somebody say, boom, hammer time. Yeah. We're breaking up the fallow ground this morning. We're breaking up, amen, the path of destruction. Come on. We ain't going back that way no more. We ain't going back that way no more. You see, praise breaks some stuff up when you pray. How you gonna fight your battle? You gonna praise your way out of your battle. Don't wait till the battle's over. Shout like you already got the victory.
Okay, so as I was preparing for the kids, we're going to be talking about the Beatitudes, and I came across this picture. And it's Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ. So, like for our own personal victory, because it's all about us and, me and my, like God's relationship, Jesus did it all. So if we have, like, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that, we have to remember the T of the can't is really the cross of Jesus. So we have to take it to Calvary. So picture like taking whatever you can, go to Calvary, present it to Him, and then through, like, He will take over where you, like, have left it, and then He will help you, and the power from above will come.
Amen. Somebody said, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. And that's why she was up here doing that, because that's probably the first time ever. Amen. So she said, I can do this. Let me tell you what I can do. I am an American. Hallelujah, son. I feel like running through a troop right now. I feel like leaping a wall right now.
Amen. When we were singing Yahweh, and Apostle was having us sing Yahweh, 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 and we started getting into a groove with that. Whenever it was like a pocket, we was in there, and in a pocket, right? And so as we continue to say Yahweh, He kept coming towards us as we kept coming towards Him, and He kept coming stronger as we continue to grow stronger. And so in your prayer time this week, call on the name of the Lord, call on Yahweh, so He can meet you where you are, so you can get revelation, illumination, inspiration in what you're trying to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
When we were singing Fear Not, for I am with thee, the Holy Spirit reminded me when DJ was like 5 years old, I was teaching him, trying to teach him a scripture. The Holy Spirit reminded me, when you learn it in song, you don't forget it. It's always with you. So what he had me teach Damascus was Isaiah 41 verse 10. And it says, fear not, but this is the way I taught it to him. Fear not, for I am with thee, be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, I will help you, I will uphold you with my right hand. And to this day, he he still remembers that. When he was away from home and he was going through stuff, he would call me and say, Mom, I remember that. So it's in his spirit. The Holy Spirit, when we were singing that, I saw my son walking through water, covered and clothed with the word of God. And the Holy Spirit reminded me of this scripture. You will not be drowned. I will not be burned. When I came out on the other side, I saw fire and I walked through the middle of it. But as I was going through the water and the fire, I was praising and worshiping my God. I was clothed with the word and I was praising as I go through. When we praise God, whatever we are going through, it cannot hold us down. It can't keep us bound, because praise is becoming to God's people, and praise connects us with the Holy Spirit and our God. So when we praise God, no matter what it is, no matter what it looks like, we encourage ourselves. Hallelujah. I give you praise, Lord. For I am with you, fear not. For I am with you, fear not. For I Hallelujah. Woo. These are our announcements. Center of Attractions Picnic will be Saturday, August the 10th at 12 noon. Please bring family and board games. Wednesday, August 21st, food giveaway. Invite and serve. Please come out and assist and let the people know who are in need, that need assistance, need that they can find it here on Wednesday. Understanding Dreams and Visions will be August 23rd through 25th, $25 per person. Fasting and prayer every Wednesday at 6 p.m. We have United Prayer. Please attend either morning Bible study at 11 or evening Bible study starting at 6 with prayer continuing at 7. Morning at 10, I'm sorry, I said 11, it's at 10. Tell someone about Jesus and invite them to church.
Let me push this on out. Scripture for the month. Scripture for the month. Scripture for the month. Amen. Scripture for the month. Scripture for the month. Scripture for the month. Amen. Romans 10:9 and 10. Repeat after me. Say Romans 10:9 and 10. You can't put this on the screen because next Sunday it ain't going to be on the screen. Amen. If it's not already in your heart, it's going to be in your heart. Amen. And I'm going militaristic on you next Sunday. So what that means is this: if you don't stand, I will identify you and embarrass you next Sunday. Amen. Now that's not my purpose, really, to embarrass you. I know some people don't like to do things publicly, and so you find that I don't really tease them publicly and such. However, we're not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. For it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, to the Jew first and then to the Greeks. Amen. Or the, I would say what I want to say, but I won't to offend anyone. All the others who are not Jews. Amen. Romans 10:9 and 10. Let's read together. Ready, read. That if thou shalt confess the Lord, that God raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession made unto salvation. There you are. Okay. Amen. We got it? How many know the scripture already? All right, stand if you know the scripture, because we're going to recite it. You will raise your hand and stand. Who knows the scripture over here? Who knows the scripture over here? Who knows Romans 10:9, 10? All right. You can take it off the screen. Let's go real quickly. Okay. Go ahead, please. All right, that's close. That's close. All right. Okay. Anyone else in the back row? Y'all stood up. You want to recite? All right, over here. Yes. Okay. Okay, were you about to say something? Amen. We got to know the word. Man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word. Say every word. Every word. That's Old and New Testament. Every word that proceeds out the mouth of God. Amen. How many going to know it next week? Let me see your hand. You're going to know it next week. You better believe it. You better believe it. You better believe it. Amen. I said amen. And how do we fight our battles? With the word. Jesus was tempted of the devil. He said, it is written. It's the word. Say, it's the word.
It's the word. Amen. Hallelujah. It's offering time. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. If you need an envelope, please raise your hand. One will be provided for you. If you are writing checks, please make your checks out to Center of Attraction. And we do have point of sale available. Oh, pastor's offering is also today. If you would like to make out or your envelope, if you have a special offering for our pastors, please indicate that on the envelope. That will be provided for you. The pastor's offering will be in our left hand.
Let's keep that constant all the time.
Yes, it will. Okay, in the left hand, tithes and offering is in the right. Praise the Lord. And while you're preparing your envelopes and checks, we stand on the Word of God. We stand on Malachi 3, starting at verse 8. It reads, "Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye said, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, for he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts." Amen. Please stand. Let's do our affirmation. Our offering affirmation. As we give our tithes and offerings, we are believing you, Lord, for jobs and better jobs, raises and bonuses, benefits, sales and commissions, estates and inheritance, interest and income, rebates and returns, checks in the mail, healing and divine health, gifts and surprises, finding money, bills paid off, settlements, debts demolished, royalties received, scholarships and grants, contracts, money management, 100-fold return according to your word in Jesus' name. Amen. Please follow the instructions of the ushers. We are now. Please stretch your hands forward. Father, we thank you for this offering, my Lord. We thank you, my Lord, and we dedicate it, my Lord, to the kingdom in the name of Jesus. We believe in increase, 100-fold return according to your word in Jesus' name. Amen. Today we do have nursery is open. All the little ones are released today to go to the nursery for ministry. Hallelujah. It's time for the word. Hallelujah. Please stretch your hand forward as we pray for the father of this house. Father, we give you our praise, thanks, and the glory. We thank you for this mighty man of valor, my God. We thank you, my Lord, that he teach us how to fight spiritually, my God, and stand on your word, my God, how to increase our faith, my God, and trust you to guide our footsteps in the way that you shall go. Father, pour into him today what you would have him to pour out to us. And we decree, my God, that open ears, attentive eyes, and alert minds, my God, will absorb all that you have for us today. In Christ Jesus' name, amen.
God bless you. Amen. Give the Lord a hand for what has already transpired. God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. Thank God for Era's family being here and helping to sing. Why don't y'all stand? I know Grace is somewhere around here. Amen. God bless you. All the way from Kentucky. Thank God for you always. It's always a pleasure to see you and to have you in our presence. We thank God for those of you who are here. I know things look a little different with cheers and such. You see that I brought out the majority of the cheers because your faith needs to increase. You heard what I just said. Your faith needs to increase. And so look to the left and right of you right now. Look to the left and right of you. All right. Well, you got some work to do. You got some work to do. You got some work to do. Amen. My prayer is that you don't get comfortable in your cheers until other cheers are comfortable with bodies. Amen. I declare that over you in Jesus' name, and I have the authority to make it so and to make it happen. Amen, y'all. Hallelujah. Because our mission, as you all know, is that of worship, Christian discipline, and the proclaiming of the gospel. Get the word out to your family. Get the word out to your friends, to your co-workers. Amen. I said amen. And some you may need to prompt, but others you just need to bring them on in and say, put on your seatbelt because here we go. Hallelujah. And they're going to have a ride of a lifetime, praise the Lord. And their life will never be the same. Hallelujah. I so enjoy the movement of the Spirit today. I thank God for Jesus being in the midst of us, his angels operating because of Christ for us. I thank God for faith being ushered forth and rivered out of us. I thank God for the gifts and the fruit in operation here today. Hallelujah. As one could put 1,000 and 2 10,000 to flight, 2 make heat, and 3 as a cord cannot be broken. Hallelujah. 1,000 may fall at one side, 10,000 at our right hand, but when we come together, nothing shall come to hurt us, harm us, or destroy us. Hallelujah, saints. Amen. Someone said, where there's unity, there's strength. So, hallelujah. The more, the merrier. Say it, the more, the merrier. We're not going to be comfortable until others accept and others also experience the comforts of the Spirit that we have. Praise the Lord, saints. We've been talking about the Holy Spirit's gifts, and we're going to conclude with the latter of the 9 gifts, the latter 3 of the 9 gifts of the Spirit. We brought to you this simple system in organizing the 9 gifts of the Spirit that comes from 1 Corinthians 12, and particularly verses 7 to 10, if you can help me, please, with the scripture. 1 Corinthians 12, verses 7 to 10. And it reads, but the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. Profit means to benefit. Let me just stop there and talk about the Spirit. Capital S, Spirit means the Holy Spirit. You cannot operate in the gifts of the Spirit without being endued, endowed, without you being infilled with the Holy Spirit. I spoke to you before that there are three kinds of spirits: the spirit of man, the devil's spirit, and God's spirit. And we're not talking about the latter two, the latter two, but we're talking about the former one, God. Because man's spirit is limited and terminal, the devil's spirit is deadly and destructive, but God's spirit is eternal and beneficial to profit with all. Verse 8 says, "For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit." Verse 9 says, "To another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another divers kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues." All right, we'll stop there. So the purpose of us going through this series of the gifts of the Spirit, why is that? I'll answer it for you. Because we need here to operate more fervently, more obediently in the gifts of the Spirit. Say, I flow in the gifts of the Spirit. Amen. And so we find here that the gifts need to be stirred up. In 2 Timothy 1 and 6, Paul says to Timothy, stir up the gifts, the gift of God that was given to you. Stir it up. How do you stir up the gift? Very simple. I'll give you another answer to my question. Obey the Spirit. When you obey the Spirit, how do you obey the Spirit? By faith. Say it's by faith. Nothing can be done in Christendom as a Christian if faith doesn't lead the way. And that by His grace, of course, because you're not the generator of faith, God is. Amen? And so it's the grace of God that endues you or gift you with the faith to obey Him. So what does God need from you? He needs from us our will. I will obey. I will be led by the Spirit. Come on now. And so Paul says to Timothy, you need to stir up what God has given to you. And so I declare over you right now that your gifts be stirred up by the very voice of God permeating through my voice and the authority of God that God has given to me by and through His Word of God that is the ultimate authority for mankind. And that the Word of God stirs you. The Word of God stirs you. The Word of God will stir you. I declare that now over you in Jesus' name. So we talked about the vocal gifts, primarily manifested by saying something, tongues, interpretation of tongues, and prophecy. Then the revelation gifts, primarily manifested by knowing something, the word of knowledge, the word of wisdom, and we talked about discerning of spirits. Now today, we will talk about the power gifts. Say it, the power gifts. Primarily manifested by doing something. So we talked about saying something and also knowing something, but now also doing something. We begin with the gift of faith. Say it, the gift of faith. Now, we're not talking about natural faith, no. Natural faith of facts and also experiences and by virtue of experts. We're not talking about natural faith, that when you came into this edifice that the door was going to open, that when you sat down, the chair was not going to break. That when you stood up, that your legs were going to support your weight, your legs supporting your weight, and so on and so forth. And that you push the button or put your key in the car is going to start. Natural faith. But this is supernatural faith, and it is by the Holy Spirit and not, what are the other two spirits? Not by man's spirit, not by the devil's spirit. No, it's by the Holy Spirit or the Spirit of God. Amen. So the gift of faith is the supernatural faith to receive miracles, generally for a specific project or time period. And so let's go to Daniel chapter 6. We're studying here today, right? We're studying the gifts. We're going to the Old Testament, Daniel, and we're going to verse 6. Thank you. It pleased Darius, the king, to set over the kingdom and 120 princes. I do need to, okay. Are we at 6 here? All right. Daniel 6 and verse 16. Daniel 6 and verse 16. And we're going also to 17, then we're going to 19 and 23. In verse 16, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continually serving God, obeying God, he is the one that will deliver you. Say, the Lord will deliver me. I don't care about your ailment. I don't care about your infirmity. I don't care about your depression. I don't care about what you're suffering in body, mind, soul, possession, whatever the case may be. God will deliver me. Say, God will deliver me. Verse 17 says, and a stone was brought, laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Verse 19. Then the king arose very early in the morning, as Daniel now has been in the lion's den all night, and went in haste unto the den of lions. Verse 20 says, and when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Verse 21. Then Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. And we continue on to verse 23. My God, verse 22. My God has sent his angel and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Verse 23. Thank you. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Somebody said the gift of faith. All right. Supernatural faith to receive miracles. How do you receive miracles without faith? Without believing God for the supernatural to take place. Look different, I think, from mountain moving faith, or this problem, oh, God took this problem away, or God did this, that, or other. This seems to be at a different level. This seems to be at a different level. Insurmountable stuff. Okay? All right? Amen? That's the best way I can explain it. I know it wasn't a good job, but that's the best way I can explain it. I mean, it's one thing that, Lord, deliver me from my cat. My kitty cat. Get away. My kitty cat is just trying to bite my little toe here. Deliver me from this cat. No, you into some lions, boy. This is beyond you. Your fate has been sealed by man. But God. Help me preach this thing here now. Somebody say, but God. Oh, there is a but God. There is a now faith for a but God. The gift of faith. The gift of faith. To receive. I believe God can do this thing. I believe he can do this thing. Is there anything, Abraham, too hard for God to do? Sarah, is there anything too hard? See, this is the gift of faith. To receive something that is so abnormal, so out of the box. God gives you that gift. As the Lord said to me, and I believe this was in the same context, as we were on Emerson Street, I would ask who remembers that, but I think just one or two that are here sitting in the pulpit remembers that. Emerson Street. And we're in this little place, and my closet office, yes, it was a closet office. And so I squeezed myself in that closet office and sat in my little chair with my little desk and began to talk to God about all that we have done, and now we're stuck. We've raised the monies, and it seemed to go no higher than $30-something thousand, and we've gone to bank after bank after bank. We have prayed and fasted. We've done all that we can do. And so, Lord, I just don't know what to do. All of a sudden, I looked at my calendar and something rose up out of me. I didn't know what it was, but I believe it was the gift of faith. And I pointed at April the 30th. This day, I'm going to know something. This day, you're going to manifest God. Yes. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I walked out that office, and April the 30th, this woman drove up to the front door of Emerson Street, our church, the little church there, and blew the horn. I looked out there. She said, you need to come check out this property over here, Pastor Moore's property. You need to see that property. And I forget all the particulars there. And I said, oh, that little building here on the corner? And so the Lord reminded me, remember you pointed your finger at your calendar and said April the 30th. Could this not be me about to move for you? And so I obeyed my wife. Say, Apostle James obeyed his wife. No, I said like this, obeyed his wife. Yes. And I went with her, we had a meeting, and now history is made, and you're sitting in the history. Now, the next power gift, well, let's go to, I want to go to Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14. We may not have that, dear, but let's go there now. Matthew 14. I want you to begin at verse 16, because you need to see something here before I move on. Matthew 14, verse 16, and we're going to 21, and then verse 25. But Jesus said unto them, they need not depart. Give them to eat. Remember that story? And let's continue on. And they say unto him, now, we're here. We got 5 loaves and just 2 fishes. All right? Verse 18. He said, bring them hither to me. So the little that you have, what should you do? Bring it to Jesus. Look at me for a moment. This is what I believe. And I could be wrong in certain respects, maybe. But according to my experiences with God, this is what I discovered. I discovered that James has to do all that James can do. James has to use whatever James has as a resource. And in that little that I have, and being faithful over little, I bring it to the Lord. And I say, God, this is as far as I can go. As far as we could go at 719 Emerson. Some of you say, as far as I can go, I can't go any further. I don't know what else to do. Bring it to the Master, and he will multiply it. But let me tell you this equation. 0 plus 0 equals 0. 0 times 0 in a Shabbat is still 0. You can square it and do it. It's still 0. Can I get at least one witness? What are you saying? Give God something to work with. Well, God can do anything he wants it. He can, but he prefers this. Got it? I'll give you some examples. He didn't say Adam be. No. He went down to the dust, and the earth gave him something to work with. All right? So now, God can. make something out of nothing. He can't do that because he stepped out on nothing and said, let there be light. But let me back this up again. He prefers this principle many times with man. Give me something, James, to work with. Amen. All right, so now the little that you have, I need you to bring that to me. Verse 19. And he commanded the multitudes, y'all sit down now on the grass, and took the 5 loaves, the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed, brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitudes. I love God because God always shows his love to us. His greatest pleasure, don't ever forget this, don't ever forget this, is to work with you for the miracle to happen. That's his greatest pleasure. I said that's his greatest pleasure. Now, of course, you're going to give him the glory. But his greatest pleasure, I believe, is to work with you so you can touch his miracle. You can take part of his miracle. He's trying to teach you something. And so Jesus went to the source of all life. He went to Daddy, Papa, Abba. And he looked up to heaven. He blessed. I don't need to preach this, but I'm feeling it here. He blessed the little. Somebody say, he blessed the little. I'm so glad I'm 5 feet 6 inches. He blessed the little. Come on, Shar. Come on, y'all. Bye. Come on now. Amen. He blessed little folk. Come on, Mother Terry. So all y'all women that want to wear these 3-4 inch Tina heels, he ain't gonna bless you. You're too tall. You need to come down and humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. I ain't looking at you, Lisa, with your tall self. I ain't looking at you. This scripture does not apply to you. He blessed the little. What do you have? What do you have? You just got 2 pennies, widow's mite? You just got a little? Give that to me. My God, I'm preaching something to somebody here today. Give God what you got. You're not required to give him what you don't have. That's the word. Then he break it. Oh, okay. Well, how about we just keep what we got? That's a spirit of poverty. Hold on. I remember I only had $1. I gave this years ago. Had $1. I felt real secure. I was patting that pocket with that dollar. I think that was 1980 or something like that. Amen. That's when gas was what? What was gas back then? 79 cents, something like that, 80 cents a gallon, something like that. And I was in service, and the Lord spoke to me. I want your last. I'm looking around like, who did he say that to? Thank you, Jesus. I love you. I love you. I said. I reached in my pocket, and I'm telling you, I did not go to the offering basket like this. I put my last dollar in. And that's when God began to bless us with furniture for our children in their bedroom, and began to bless us with so many other things. Because it's a trust factor. My God, let me hurry up. So he looked to heaven, blessed it, thank you, for the source, the resource that we have right now. Break it, and gave the loaves to his disciples. This is what he's saying. Disciples, work with me in this miracle. You're not going to perform the miracle, but you're my vehicle of the miracle. You got it now. The scripture doesn't say it multiplied. When he gave the little pieces to his disciples, when they obeyed their master and started to serve, it started multiplying. More fish, more loaves. They look at the basket, more was in there. He gave it to his disciples to the multitudes. Amen. I love that. And verse 20, 21, 22, 23, let's do this quickly. And they did all eat. I said they did all eat and were filled. And they took up the fragments that remained, 12 baskets full. Verse 21. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, not including the women and the children. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into the ship and to go before him on the other side, away from the multitudes, etc. All right, we're going to stop right there. Amen. No, let's go to verse 25. Go to verse 25. See why I have this here. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. Wow. There's another miracle. Yes. We know the story. One man out of the 12 had the gift of faith. In other words, he was ready to receive the miracle to what? To what? Walk on water. Father, we receive the gift of faith. Say it. I receive the gift. The next power gift is the working of miracles. And you see here how faith performs the miracle. Faith, the gift of faith, and the working of miracles works together many times. This is the working of miracles, a supernatural inspired act that temporarily intervenes in the course of natural law. Mark 4 and 39. Mark 4 and 39. If we can get that, please. While that's coming to the screen here, I also remind you of the battle of Joshua. While he was battling, what happened? He began to make a demand on the sun. Did he not? That the sun would not wane, lose its sight, go down. I forget the terminology he used. And the sun stood still, did not move. Somebody said miracles. Miracles. Hallelujah. The natural law is that the sun doesn't, well, you know what I'm saying, actually it's the earth, but okay. The sun is supposed to move from east to west. Here it comes. Is lowering itself, is going down. Not so with Joshua said, no, because we need as much light as possible to win this battle. Yes. Son, you're not going nowhere. The gift of faith can get you to say stuff out of your mouth. Have you ever done this before? Yes. And when you said it, it's like, who said that? Did I say that? The gift of faith ain't no joke. No joke, no joke. It wants what it wants, if I can say it like that, because God is doing the ushering and saying, this must happen for destiny. Yes. When a supernatural being called Satan is constantly coming against you. You've done all that you could do. All of a sudden, the gift of faith to work a miracle begins to come about. You begin to speak you begin like Joshua to declare. And you would say something like, this is the last day that this will occur and this will happen. It stops, in the world, the book stops here. It stops now in the name of Jesus. And I tell you something, it does stop. Amen. I'll give you something just as simple. I know you may not believe this, and that's what miracles are, unbelievable. But you may not believe this. But I'm studying, I'm in the midst of Revelation. Here comes this buzz fly. It was a big joker. I'm swatting it, get on out of here. It frustrated me to no end. You will die now. God is my witness, you were not there. It dropped right on my desk. Dead. Get on out of here. Come on now, working of miracles for a fly. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, leave Apostle James alone. Tell him it ain't none of your business. Amen. I said amen. In Mark 4:39, and he arose, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased. And there was a great calm. Now that was Jesus. Now come on. That was Jesus. Jesus is operating as the next Adam, how Adam should have acted if he would have obeyed God. So now he comes down as Adam should have acted and as a signet or a sign, a foreshadowing of how those who would believe in him would also act. Well, he was God. He worked as the Son of Man to let us know, whether literal or figurative, speak to the wind. Speak to the waves of the sea. And exercise your faith. Peace be still. Your thoughts is just going all, whirling all in your mind. You lay hands on yourself and say, now, mind, brain, both of you, be still now. I think you have worked more miracles than what you think. This is what the Holy Spirit just told me to tell you. And you didn't know it. Working of miracles. Miracles still work. I haven't seen any miracle. When God uses you to present Christ to someone, all of a sudden they begin to get out of character and cry or weep or go through some kind of contortion that is abnormal, and they accept Jesus as Savior and Lord. It's a miracle. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things now have become new, for that are miracle. Didn't think of that, did you? Working of miracles also cast devils out. You can't cast a devil out without miracles working. Let me read it again. A supernatural inspired act that temporarily intervenes in the course of natural law. He or she has gone to the counselor long enough. Come on in here. Let's get some oil. And let's cast that thing out. You understand me? You can't counsel a demon. You can't sprawl a demon out on the couch and begin to ask questions. You have to know the difference. You have to discern and know the difference. Some could be, as it relates to bipolarism or schizophrenia or some kind of mania at work. It could be. But when it is demonic and you cast that spirit out, there is the working of miracles. Last power gift, the gifts of healing. It didn't say gift singular, gifts plural. Supernatural healing of disease without natural means. This gift does not, however, preclude the use of natural means as well. And we'll talk about that. Let's go to Acts 19, verses 9 to 12. Then we're going to go to Jesus' account as well. But when divers were hardened, this is Acts 19, verse 9. But when divers were hardened and believed not, but spake evil of that way before the multitude, he departed from them, separated the disciples, disputing daily in the school of one Tyrannus. And this continued by the space of 2 years, so that all they which dwelt in Asia heard the word of the Lord Jesus, both Jews and Greeks. And God wrought special miracles by the hands of Paul. Verse 12. So that from his body were brought unto the sick handkerchiefs or aprons, and the diseases departed from them, and the evil spirits went out of them. Somebody say point of contact. Point of contact. The power gifts operate through the point or the points of contact. Anointed oil. Here, the aprons or handkerchiefs of Paul. And such like. And so we find here that the gifts of healing are in operation. Now, some believe that gifts also means obviously more than one kind of anointing to heal by the gifts, by the operation of the Holy Spirit. So some people believe in dental ministry. Some believe in eye ministry. Some believe in cancer ministry. In other words, a man or woman of God who operates in the gifts of healing seems to have a specialty against cancer or specialty in dentistry, which means this. You don't have teeth, now after I pray you do. You need root canals or whatever the case may be. We've been there. We've seen it with our own eyes. You know how it is, amen. Especially if you're a new believer. It's like, oh, come on, I need to see that. Open your mouth, let me see. Gold crosses, silver crosses in their teeth that once was rotten or whatever the condition it was in. Every time he prayed, for those who believed, received. So that's another thought concerning what gifts mean, okay? Specialties of healings or operations of healing. All right? Now, we go to Mark chapter 1, verse 41, as I'm concluding here. Mark 1:41. And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him and said unto him, I will, this is the leper, be thou clean. Let's go to Mark chapter 5. And let's go to verses, starting at verse 8, and then we'll conclude with this scripture. Mark 5. Verse 8, for he said unto him, come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. All right, next. And he asked him, what's your name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. And that's another teaching right there. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, close to 2,000. And all the devils besought him, saying, send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. Verse 13. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out, entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000 and were choked in the sea. Somebody say swine sense.
Swine sense.
Some of us need to have swine sense. If the pigs didn't want the demons, why do you? Swine sense. And so the working of miracles, as I forestated, having to do with casting spirits out. Now, as I alluded to before, there is an interconnection of gifts. Using the speaking gifts will generally lead you to something revealed. Hence, you will move into the revelation gifts. And as you pray in the Spirit and commune with God, your mind will be attuned to what God knows. This knowing generally falls into the revelation gifts. And also the revelation gifts can launch you into one or several of the power gifts. We call this the interconnection of gifts. For me, particularly, use myself as an example, as it relates to the revelation gifts. It could be the word of knowledge, wisdom, or it could be prophecy. So now God reveals, he prophesies concerning health and such like. And then after that, I feel a thrust, amen, to begin to lay hands and to command the healing to take place. It would be unjust for the Lord, all right, to say this about your body and acknowledge some things concerning the element of your body and not heal you on spot at point. Is that not true? So you have to be ready for the gifts to operate. Now, as I conclude, the gifts should be covered by the fruit of the Spirit. That's Galatians 5:20-24. And the associated scripture, 1 Corinthians 14:1. Again, cover the gifts, covered by the Spirit. In other words, you can get into a power gift and wow, revelatory gift and wow, vocal gifts and wow. And sometimes people may misinterpret what you're saying, what you're doing, thinking you're in the flesh or a little hard. And sometimes we can be more hard than necessary, okay? The gifts begins to soften the steps of operation, to soften your voice, all right? Because God is speaking doesn't necessarily mean you got to scream it. And the Lord! You know, come on. You know, unless the lion is roaring, then you roar. If the Lion of Judah is not roaring, you don't roar. You just speak the words. The words of God contains His Spirit, and your emotion has nothing to do with how powerful or less powerful it is. The gift, the fruit of Spirit, kindness, gentleness, you just begin to share that, you know, and I need some help on that. So, let us stand as we wrap this up now and pray for you. Let us all stand. So, where does this begin for me? Because I want to operate in the gifts of the Spirit. I want to operate with more of the gifts of the Spirit. First, you need to be filled with the Spirit of God. Genuinely, listen to me. The Spirit of God cannot be caught by someone else's spirit. I'm not saying that doesn't, you know, electrify you, but I'm saying you got filled with the Spirit because your neighbor, they're speaking in tongues, so now you can speak. No. This is an intimate one-on-one with you and Yahweh. You must be born again, and I must say, this is me talking, you must be filled with the Holy Ghost, speaking in other tongues, as the Spirit give others. You cannot flow in the gifts without the Spirit of God. Anything else is demonic and human-centered. Amen? So, how does it begin? Number one, be a student of His presence. Stay in His presence. Stay in His presence. You will come away gifted. You will come away full of His Spirit and presence. And it wells up in you so much, you got to speak. You got to operate. Here comes the strategy of God to do something for someone's benefit. And the lesser of the communication is texting and messaging. Don't do that if you can. Call them. That's the next dimension that's more intimate. And if you can be in person with them. Now FaceTime is good too, I guess. But be a student of His presence. Number two, have a desire, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, a desire. I want to be used by, use me up. I want to be used by you. Yes. And the scripture is clear. If you want God to use you, here it is here. He will, by and through His gifts. Say, I desire the gifts of the Spirit. And then number three, once you desire it, and all this is by what? I love it. Very good. Right. It's by faith. I'm believing. So the next step, guess what God will do? Give you opportunity. So He will talk to you, speak to you. See that sister over there? Their right arm has an issue. I want you to go and lay your hands on her. When you obey the Lord in the order of the Spirit, the gift will be stirred. Look at me. The gifts can only be stirred by your obedience. The gift ain't going to do this to you. Come on. By your will, by your obedience. So, let's go over this again. You're going to be a student of His presence. Because if not, you'll try to do something by the flesh, and that will not please God. Number two, you have a desire for that. Because God ain't going to put nothing on you you don't want. Number three, you're going to obey then the Spirit's movement. And then lastly, you're going to study to show yourself approved concerning that gift. The word of knowledge just seems to flow through me all the time. Then you need to know more about the word of knowledge so you won't grieve the Spirit concerning that vein, that stream, that flow. Study to show yourself approved unto God. A workman at that thing. So you can rightly divide, was that me or was that you, Holy Ghost? You can rightly divide the truth. Amen. Listen to me, look at me. You can't know the truth without studying the truth. Sorry. Because you're only left with your truth and your imagination. I got a loved one that I have to always check and pull down. I know that's what you think. I think, let's go to scripture now. Not what you're thinking. Because we can be happy about a lot of things. Oh, this is, and because it's a good idea doesn't make it a God one. Amen. Let's pray. Father, for those that have a listening ear to hear what the Spirit has to say, that this word not fall on deaf ears, not fall to the ground, not depart from their spirit. I pray now, Father, that you stir them. I pray that you give them the desire. I pray that, Lord God, they would humble themselves to the will of this truth. And that, God, they would take these actions seriously so that the body at large can be benefited. And Father, I just declare that now. So in the name of Jesus, I declare let the gifts right now, just begin to open your spirit to him now. Begin to pray in the spirit too. That stirs the gift. Begin to open your spirit up. And Father, as they open their spirit up, now I declare, let the 9 gifts of the operation, however you will, Spirit, begin to operate in everyone under the sound of my voice, those that are viewing, those that are hearing this CD right now, in the name of Jesus Christ. That as they prioritize themselves to your presence, to be sensitive to your leading and obedience, to God desiring that which you desire for them, to study this gift, these gifts. We thank you now that they will be strong in the Lord concerning these gifts and in the power of your might. Let it flow right now. Let it flow. Come on, receive. Just tell the Lord, I receive it. Let it flow right now, Father. Flow right now, Father. Flow right now. Come on. I rebuke the spirit of fear off of your life. I rebuke that spirit, and I'm commanding the spirit of God's faith to operate by his grace. Thank you now that your grace is sufficient for everyone now under the sound of my voice. In Jesus' name, amen. Come on, let's seal this with some praise. Let's thank the Lord. Are you saved today? Are you saved, young people, teenagers, adults? Amen. Are y'all saved today? You died right now, you know I'll be in heaven with the Lord. Hallelujah. No turning back. Hallelujah. I'm up there in heaven, me and God. You sure of that? Because if not, the answer is Jesus. The answer is Jesus. All who call on the name of Jesus shall be saved. Amen. Are you covered? Do you have a church covering you? Have a man and woman of God covering you today? As I look around, it seems to be. Amen. And so let's cover someone in prayer today, even. Certainly as we get ready for communion. But let's you know who's not here. You know who's not here. So let's cover them in prayer and believe God that whatever their needs are. The Hills are still out of town. I guess they'll be back today or tomorrow. And I don't know who else is on vacation or whatever. We want safety. We don't ever want to hear bad reports, right? People getting into car accidents and that kind of thing. So right now, I don't know who they are. You do. Lift their name up before the Lord right now. Thank you, God, for hearing the prayers of the righteous right now. Hallelujah. Amen. You may be seated. I remind you tonight is our service. And let me just say this also that, please, and whoever's ready to serve in communion, be ready to do that. Tonight, we invited the city and the region to come. We have 2 special speakers from Detroit, husband-wife team, and they're going to worship with us. That's their ministry, and also Dan will be preaching, and it's going to be a powerful time. Of course, we'll be open to the Spirit, what the Spirit has to say and do. Let me also say that we need the workers here today. Praise team and all. Let's get here by 6, no later than 6, okay? We want to be here promptly because guests come, they're excited, and they're here. And the thing that is troubling to me is that they're here before we're here, all right? And so we want to be here and be hospitable to them and be ready. So greeters and ushers and those who are here serving in whatever capacity, we certainly want that to happen. Amen. And we have our praise team ready today for tonight at 6:30, and all servants here at 6.